Princess Beatrice did not raise her voice. She did not issue a threat, reveal a scandalous document, or accuse anyone by name. She simply looked across a private Windsor drawing room and delivered a sentence powerful enough to silence every person inside it. "I have never trusted anyone like I trust Catherine." In that instant, a personal confession became a royal declaration, and those who understood its true meaning knew the monarchy had just witnessed a decisive shift in loyalty. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Beatrice had entered the meeting expecting pressure, not confession. The private family discussion at Windsor Castle had been arranged to decide who would guide her through increasing public duties while protecting her children from palace demands. Public duties meant the official appearances and charitable responsibilities carried out on behalf of the crown, and the issue mattered because greater visibility could bring influence while exposing her young family to scrutiny. Charles expected a procedural conversation. Instead, Beatrice transformed it into a personal reckoning. She slowly removed a ring, placed it beside her untouched tea, and looked directly at Catherine. Her hands trembled, yet her voice remained steady. The words had clearly lived inside her long before that afternoon. Catherine appeared stunned rather than pleased. She understood that Beatrice was not offering casual praise. William watched his wife's expression tighten as the meaning settled across the room. Andrew lowered his eyes, realizing his daughter had placed her deepest emotional faith beyond her immediate household. That mattered, because trust involving children, future responsibilities, and private decisions could reshape who held real influence around Beatrice. The silence grew heavier when Charles asked whether she understood the weight of her declaration. Beatrice met the king's gaze and answered, "I understand it better than anyone here." Her reply came from a documented account recorded by the meeting secretary, leaving no doubt about what had been said. It also suggested that Catherine's loyalty had been tested during a painful event others wanted buried. Beatrice was not simply saying Catherine was kind, she was giving the Princess of Wales confidence over matters involving her children, her public protection, and sensitive family choices. Royal confidence meant private authority granted through personal trust rather than law, and it carried consequences no palace statement could easily reverse. When the meeting ended, Catherine remained seated. Beatrice walked toward the door, stopped, and whispered that she would explain everything privately, but only after revealing why her trust in several others had collapsed. To understand why Beatrice placed such extraordinary faith in Catherine, the palace first had to confront what each woman stood to lose if that trust was broken. The declaration sounded sudden, but the bond behind it had been forming in silence for years. Catherine and Beatrice occupied very different positions inside the royal family, one preparing to become queen, the other carrying the burdens of a bloodline repeatedly pulled into controversy. Yet behind formal smiles and carefully staged appearances, they had developed something rare within palace walls, a relationship that did not depend on rank, usefulness, or public approval. Catherine understood the weight of what Beatrice had placed in her hands. As the future queen, meaning the woman expected to stand beside the next monarch and help shape the family's public direction, every private promise she made could one day influence far more than friendship. It could affect family stability, public duties, and the emotional rules inherited by the next generation. That was why she did not treat Beatrice's trust as praise. She treated it as a responsibility. Beatrice carried a different burden. She loved Sarah Ferguson, remained tied to Prince Andrew, and had built a life with Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi while trying to protect her daughters from controversies they had not created. The struggle mattered because every scandal surrounding older relatives threatened to follow the children into rooms where they had done nothing wrong. Love remained, but love no longer erased the need for boundaries. Beatrice feared those boundaries would be called betrayal. Openly trusting Catherine could look like a rejection of her parents or even of Charles. Yet silence had already cost her too much. She had learned that loyalty without protection could become another form of surrender. Catherine felt that truth after the Windsor meeting. She stood alone until William joined her, then admitted that Beatrice had entrusted her with something larger than a secret. She had handed her the duty of never becoming another source of disappointment. The prince listened as his wife confessed that failing Beatrice would also mean failing the children who had been drawn into the promise. Their bond had been built through action. Catherine checked on Beatrice after hostile headlines, kept her close during ceremonial gatherings, and spoke to her as a mother rather than a peripheral royal. A peripheral royal was a family member outside the central working group, often present, but rarely given real influence. Catherine never used that distance to diminish her. Later that evening, Beatrice entered a small guest room where Catherine waited without aids. She remained standing and asked, "Do you remember what you promised me about the girls?" Catherine answered yes before she could finish. Years earlier, she had taken Beatrice's hand and promised that the children would never be punished for adult choices. But the promise alone did not explain Beatrice's public declaration. The real turning point began on a day when one humiliating palace decision placed her family directly in the line of fire. Every royal rupture has a moment that appears insignificant to outsiders, but becomes unforgettable to those trapped inside it. For Beatrice, that moment came during a private family ceremony at St. George's Chapel, when a last-minute seating change separated her from her husband and placed her children's future under whispered scrutiny. No announcement was made, no explanation was offered, yet as attendants moved the name cards, Beatrice realized someone had decided her family could be rearranged without even speaking to her. Beatrice reached the narrow corridor minutes before the commemorative service began and saw an attendant holding her altered place card. St. George's Chapel is the royal church inside Windsor Castle, used for family services, weddings, and national ceremonies. The change was described as protocol, the formal system governing rank and placement, but it moved her away from Eduardo and placed her behind less senior relatives without explanation. Then the deeper insult surfaced. Her children's names had disappeared from the adjoining family reception plan. Beatrice understood immediately why it mattered. A seating adjustment could be dismissed as organization, but removing the girls suggested that her entire household could be reduced whenever palace pressure made them inconvenient. Beatrice asked who had authorized the decision. No one gave her a direct answer. Her face burned as she fought back tears, while Eduardo Mapelli Mozzi stayed close and urged her not to react before the chapel doors opened. He remained calm, but her husband could see that the humiliation had struck at the fear she carried most, that old family scandals would eventually be used against their children. Catherine arrived before the silence could harden. She studied the revised plan, asked one question, and understood enough. The Princess of Wales instructed the attendant to restore Beatrice's original place. When a senior household official objected that approval had already been given, she refused to retreat. "A family is not divided for convenience," Catherine said, making clear that protocol would not become camouflage for cruelty. Catherine then lifted the displaced name card herself and returned it to its original wooden stand. The soft click ended the argument. Beatrice watched without speaking, because she understood the risk the future queen had accepted. Catherine had challenged a senior official without knowing whether Charles or another household had supported the change. After the service, Beatrice admitted in a private corridor conversation that this was not the first effort to make her feel expendable. Catherine answered that continued silence would only teach others they could move her again. Those words changed Beatrice's understanding of loyalty. Protection was not quiet agreement. Sometimes, it required resistance. Months later, the same language of convenience returned at Windsor. This time, Beatrice recognized it, and she refused to let Catherine stand alone. When the same forces resurfaced at Windsor, Beatrice was no longer willing to accept a quiet correction. She was ready to confront the person who believed her loyalty could still be controlled. The palace expected Beatrice to soften her declaration once the first shock had passed. Instead, she requested a second meeting and insisted that no private secretaries, advisors, or household officials be present. When the doors closed, she found herself facing Charles, Andrew, William, and Catherine across a polished table. What followed was not a rebellion against the crown, it was something more uncomfortable. a daughter refusing to let family loyalty be used as a reason for permanent silence. Charles opened the discussion by asking whether Beatrice intended Catherine to hold a formal advisory role in decisions concerning her duties and children, or whether the earlier statement had been purely emotional. An advisory role meant an acknowledged position of trusted guidance, without granting legal authority. The distinction mattered, because a private bond could be ignored, but an official arrangement would alter who influenced her household. Andrew could no longer contain his anger. He asked his daughter whether she understood how humiliating her words had been for him. Beatrice answered that humiliation was not betrayal. She had spent years protecting him, defending family unity, and carrying consequences created by scandals that were never hers. Her loyalty had cost her silence, but it would not cost her children's security. Catherine tried to end the collision before it deepened. She offered to withdraw from any formal involvement, believing her absence might restore peace. Beatrice turned toward her immediately. "Please do not abandon me just to make everyone else comfortable." William watched his wife absorb the plea, and the prince understood that stepping back would not heal the family. It would repeat the very rejection Beatrice feared. Beatrice then disclosed the real source of her distrust through a recorded account later preserved by a family secretary. Confidential concerns she had shared through palace channels had returned to her distorted, stripped of context, and used to pressure her choices. Palace channels were the official routes through which private family matters passed between households and advisors. Catherine alone had never repeated her words, weaponized them, or demanded anything in return. Charles tested the declaration one final time. The king asked whether Beatrice trusted Catherine with decisions affecting her children if she and Eduardo were ever unable to act. Silence settled over the table before she answered yes. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Andrew pushed back his chair, rose, and demanded that his daughter take the words back. Beatrice stood too, but she did not match his anger. She moved beside Catherine. The choice was unmistakable. She was not rejecting her father, yet she would no longer stand alone to protect his feelings. Charles ended the meeting without agreement and ordered a formal review of Beatrice's family arrangements, placing the matter inside the same machinery she no longer trusted. Beatrice had finally spoken the truth inside the room, but the next battle would be fought through authority, procedure, and the question of who had the power to make her trust official. Trust inside a royal family is never entirely private. The moment it affects children, duties, access, or future responsibilities, it becomes part of the machinery of the crown. Beatrice's declaration had therefore created a question no one could dismiss as sentiment. Would Catherine's role remain an informal bond between two women, or would the monarchy recognize her as the person Beatrice had chosen to stand beside her when the pressure became unbearable? Charles held the authority to approve any formal change to Beatrice's support arrangements, but the king knew this was no ordinary household decision. A royal support arrangement meant the approved network of relatives and officials guiding appearances, family participation, and sensitive responsibilities. William's future position and Catherine's growing influence meant any decision would shape not only Beatrice's protection, but the emotional culture of the monarchy itself. A confidential framework was drafted with deliberate restraint. It named Catherine as Beatrice's principal royal confidant for ceremonial planning, concerns involving her children, and private discussions affecting her household's participation in official events. The role carried no legal control, yet its meaning was unmistakable. Beatrice's trust would no longer depend on goodwill alone. Catherine resisted the idea at first. In a private conversation with William, she admitted that formal recognition could make years of kindness appear calculated. She feared Beatrice might eventually wonder whether every quiet call, every act of protection, and every promise involving the girls had been part of a strategy to build influence. William rejected that fear. The prince reminded her that refusing responsibility could now look more political than accepting it. Charles read the proposed framework alone. When he reached the line naming Catherine as Beatrice's chosen confidant, he removed his glasses and set the page down. The monarch understood the deeper accusation without anyone speaking it. A younger woman had found safety outside the system he led. That mattered, because institutions lose loyalty long before they lose authority. And Beatrice's decision exposed that dangerous separation. William later told his father that Catherine would accept only if Beatrice's choice remained voluntary and could never be overridden for convenience. The future king made clear that his wife would not become another tool used to manage a royal woman into silence. Beatrice added one condition: no decision concerning her children's ceremonial treatment could be made without her direct knowledge. Catherine supported the clause immediately. Charles signed with a black fountain pen, drew a line beneath the protection, and told William, "This should never have needed to be written." He answered, "That is why it must be." The approval was private. The leak was not. The signature gave Beatrice the protection she had requested, yet the leaked details ensured that the people closest to her would experience that protection as a public judgment against them. The decision had barely been approved when the first details reached those who had not been in the room. By evening, Sarah Ferguson knew that Catherine had been formally recognized as Beatrice's chosen royal confidant. Andrew knew the arrangement included decisions involving his grandchildren. What had been designed to give Beatrice peace now returned to her as an accusation, that by choosing someone she trusted, she had publicly identified the people she no longer trusted enough. A palace staff member passed the outline to another royal household, and within hours, private calls carried the news through the family. A royal household is the group of staff and advisors supporting a senior family member's official and personal responsibilities. No announcement had been issued, but the meaning felt painfully clear. Beatrice saw protection and honest boundaries. Her parents saw a written judgment against everything they believed they still represented in her life. Sarah called from Royal Lodge before Beatrice had prepared herself. The Duchess asked whether she had failed as a mother. Beatrice closed her eyes and gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, fighting to keep her voice steady. She explained that choosing Catherine did not erase years of love, loyalty, or gratitude. Sarah listened, then answered, "It feels as though someone else has been given the part of you I thought was mine." Beatrice broke after the call ended. She lowered herself beside a chair and cried with the exhaustion of someone who had spent years trying to protect everyone at once. Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi knelt beside her and reminded his wife that boundaries were not cruelty, even when those outside them experienced pain. He understood why the framework mattered. Without clear protection, their children could once again become collateral damage in battles they had never chosen. Andrew reacted with colder finality. He refused to attend an upcoming family lunch at Windsor and sent a brief message stating that he would not join a gathering where his daughter's distrust had been formally endorsed. His absence turned private heartbreak into a visible family fracture. Catherine offered to speak personally with Sarah and Andrew when she learned what had happened. Beatrice stopped her. She would not allow the woman who had protected her to apologize for being trustworthy. For the first time, she was defending Catherine instead of depending on Catherine to defend her. Late that night, Beatrice opened a handwritten note sent after the chapel incident. Its final line read, "You never need permission to ask for dignity." She pressed the paper flat, dried her eyes, and asked Catherine to meet alone the next morning. With every institution and relative temporarily removed, the future of their relationship would rest on what two women were finally brave enough to say to each other in private. There were no officials outside the door, no prepared statements on the table, and no family members waiting to interpret every sentence. Beatrice and Catherine met shortly after sunrise in a small sitting room at Adelaide Cottage, each carrying a different fear. Beatrice feared she had placed an impossible burden on the woman she trusted most. Catherine feared that accepting the role would deepen a daughter's separation from her parents. For once, neither woman was required to perform certainty. Beatrice understood why this conversation had to remain private. It was the first time since her declaration that neither palace protocol nor family pressure stood between them. Palace protocol meant the formal rules and procedures controlling royal conduct, access, and communication. Without that machinery shaping every word, the two women could finally confront the personal cost of what had happened, rather than debate who possessed authority. Beatrice had arrived prepared to release Catherine from the arrangement. She explained that she wanted the Princess of Wales to remain because she cared, not because duty had trapped her. If the responsibility threatened Catherine's marriage, her relationship with Charles, or her future position, Beatrice would step back. She needed loyalty freely given, not another sacrifice disguised as support. Catherine admitted she had barely slept. She feared that accepting Beatrice's trust might make Sarah feel erased or replaced. The future queen said she could offer honesty, protection, and discretion, but she would never help remove a mother from her daughter's emotional life. That boundary mattered because Catherine understood how quickly royal families turned closeness into competition, forcing women to defend places that love had never truly threatened. Beatrice rejected that fear. Catherine was not replacing anyone. She trusted her because she had never demanded ownership of her affection. Others had asked Beatrice to prove loyalty by remaining silent, choosing sides, or accepting humiliation. Catherine had allowed her to speak without making love for one relative feel like betrayal of another. Then Beatrice revealed the deeper origin of that trust, in a private recorded conversation preserved for the family account. During the darkest period of her life, Catherine had been the only senior royal who called, without first asking what she intended to say publicly. She had asked whether Beatrice was coping. That distinction changed everything. Catherine had seen the person before the palace problem. Catherine agreed to remain her confidant on one condition: their bond must rebuild communication, not create a rival family camp. Beatrice promised to speak honestly with her parents. Beatrice reached across the table, but Catherine stood and embraced her first. "I knew you would not make me choose," she whispered. Catherine answered, "You should never have been asked to." Their private promise had restored the bond between them, but once the palace doors opened, the world would judge whether Beatrice's declaration represented family healing or a devastating vote of no confidence. By midday, the story had escaped the boundaries of royal conversation and become a national argument about loyalty, motherhood, and the future character of the monarchy. Commentators debated whether Beatrice had elevated Catherine, condemned her parents, or exposed a palace incapable of protecting its own. Yet the moment that defined the public reaction was not a headline or official statement. It was a single photograph taken outside Windsor, two women walking together, while the institution struggled to explain what their unity meant. Buckingham Palace responded with one guarded sentence, describing Catherine and Beatrice's bond as close family confidence and mutual support. Buckingham Palace is the monarch's main administrative headquarters, where official royal statements are prepared and released. The wording avoided every dangerous detail. It said nothing about the children, the confidential framework, or the collapse of trust that had forced Beatrice to demand protection in writing. Broadcasters divided almost immediately. Some called Catherine the stabilizing force, now trusted across royal generations. Others argued that Beatrice's declaration proved the family's private support system had failed. The debate mattered because it transformed one woman's boundary into a public test of whether the monarchy protected vulnerable relatives or merely managed their silence. Beatrice faced that pressure while leaving Windsor for a scheduled charity engagement. Reporters shouted questions about Andrew, Sarah, and whether she had rejected her parents. She kept walking, but her expression tightened as each question turned love into accusation. Catherine noticed. The Princess of Wales stepped closer and briefly placed a hand against Beatrice's back before they entered the vehicle. That gesture changed the story. It was protective without becoming possessive, and it reflected the exact quality Beatrice had described. Catherine offered support without demanding ownership. She did not pull her away from her family. She simply refused to let her face the pressure alone. The Crown Chronicle intensified the reaction the next morning. Its full-width front page showed the two women beneath the headline, "Trust her with everything." Beatrice looked forward while Catherine turned toward her, alert to the strain surrounding them. Near the long walk, the broad ceremonial route leading toward Windsor Castle, a crowd gathered with flowers and handwritten cards. One message against the gates read, "Trust is not betrayal." A veteran royal correspondent later held up the front page during an evening broadcast and said, "This is not the image of one woman replacing another. It is the image of one woman refusing to let another face the cameras alone. Beatrice watched the clip without speaking. Then she reached for her phone and called Sarah. The public had already delivered its judgment, but Beatrice's story could not truly end until she returned home and explained, face to face, what her trust in Catherine did and did not mean. Beatrice's declaration began as a sentence that divided a room, but it ended by forcing the royal family to confront a truth it had avoided for years. Loyalty demanded through fear is not loyalty at all. Trust cannot be inherited through blood, assigned by rank, or protected by silence. It must be earned repeatedly, especially when reputation, duty, and family history make honesty dangerous. Catherine had earned it, and Beatrice was finally prepared to explain why that choice belonged to her alone. Beatrice returned to Royal Lodge without advisors. Eduardo remained elsewhere, leaving the conversation to parents and daughter. Royal Lodge is Andrew's Windsor residence, but that morning affection would either survive honesty or collapse beneath it. Beatrice told Sarah and Andrew that Catherine's role was not a transfer of love, punishment, or public verdict. It recognized the person who had handled her vulnerability, without leaking it, judging it, or demanding loyalty in return. Beatrice had spent years protecting others while remaining unprotected. Sarah admitted she had heard the declaration as proof she was no longer needed. Beatrice took her mother's hands and said, "You are my mother. Catherine is the person I trust, to help me protect what being your daughter has taught me to value." Sarah cried, but she did not pull away. Andrew struggled longer. He asked whether his daughter would ever trust him that way again. Beatrice answered that trust could be rebuilt, but not by pretending the past caused no damage. The Duke, a title given to senior male royals, remained silent before nodding. For Beatrice, that restraint was a beginning. Catherine later learned through a private recorded conversation that the meeting had succeeded. She asked Charles to keep the framework limited and confidential. She wanted no title, authority, or public praise. That refusal confirmed why Beatrice trusted her. Catherine accepted responsibility without seeking possession. Charles retained protections and ordered that no royal child could be removed from ceremonial arrangements without parental consultation. A wound had created a standard of dignity. Days later, Beatrice entered a family service beside Sarah, crossed the aisle, and greeted Catherine. No seat moved. No instruction followed. Andrew watched without turning away. Unity could no longer demand silent suffering. Love remained, boundaries stood, and trust had to be earned. There was no further confrontation waiting beyond that moment, only the lasting certainty that Beatrice had chosen truth, Catherine had honored it, and the family had finally learned that trust becomes strongest when no one is forced to surrender themselves in order to receive it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.